out and see if anybody's out there. Have them come in. And call you in so we can be timely. Everybody remember that we have to spring forward. Tonight is spring forward. So we're actually at 8:10. Art's already yawning. Art's been yawning all day. He's got a cold, so he's feeling a little down tonight. No, but so everybody remember to spring forward or you're going to be late for church. In fact, if you're normally late for church, you might miss church totally. You might not only miss the song service, you might miss the offering and half the preaching. All right, so be sure and spring forward. Now, to all of you that are here tonight, I apologize because I am probably going to send out a one call now message to the church reminding them as well, okay? So if you get that, don't blow my phone up. It's me. If it comes from 738-7899, let me remind everybody, if you get a call from that number, particularly in the evening, which is typically when I send out those messages, it's not really coming from me. It's coming from One Call Now, okay? You're going to get a call from my 709-1905 number if I was calling you in the evening. Now, during the day, I might call you from 738. Depends on where I'm at or what's going on. But, okay, so be aware of that I might be hitting your phone a little later tonight as soon as this session's over, and because of reminding everybody in the church as far as spring forward. I hate spring forward, but boy, do I love fall back. Woo, baby, I love fall back. All right, Janet, let's rock and roll.
Okay, I got a question. Is that Art right there? Who's Art? Did you say Art? Who's yawning? Okay, I read something today, and I read it to my dad. I said, I'm not using this, but I read it. It was kind of funny, but it was a quote, and this guy was saying, I see communication as a mental exercise. And so when I get into conversations, I don't want to overextend myself, and occasionally I need to stretch. That's why I roll my eyes and I yawn a lot. It has to do with that exercise piece, but I thought that was kind of funny. All right. Applied communication. Well, I'm going to kind of pick up a little bit of where, Stephen left off, talking with Adam and Eve and this miscommunication and okay, so it didn't start off so good way back then, but yes, stuff was happening. If we look at it, though, it's the first couple, and in regards to communication, what happened? Stephen touched on some of this. I'm going to touch on it on a little bit of a different point. Some of it overlaps. Okay, they failed to build a relationship with God as a couple, bound together as one flesh, okay? Because it really helps us if we, as a married couple, as partners, that we create that. And so often what I see, I have couples in my office, they've been together for a long time, and they've learned to coexist. They have their lives. They raise children, but they've never truly bonded together. They haven't become a couple as that one flesh that the Scripture talks about. So I want to look a little bit at that, okay? So in Ecclesiastes, we have see, and that wasn't even thrown out there. But anyhow, this whole two, okay? Two become one. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor, right? How many husbands and wives both work? You got good return for your labor, don't you? It's kind of a little bit better than just one of you working. So you get both of you. So you got your labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them. I asked my sister, my husband's back's out. It's really bad this week. And I called her before I left and I said, I know you got a lot going on, but will you please call Jack every day? I'll be calling him, but will you call and check on him? I hate the idea that if he falls down, there's no one there to help him get up. That he'll fall down and won't be able to get up because his back's really bad. He's walking around like this, dragging this leg. And it's just like, I don't want him to lay there for a long time before anybody notices. And so, that if someone falls down, we can help them get up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. I greatly miss my husband when it comes to that. My feet have been so cold this week. I love having that body where I can stick my feet over there and get them warm, and he doesn't even complain. And I hear him go, but other than that, we are good. And so he doesn't complain, and so we can keep warm. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. And I like this last one. And again, my brother, he's the Bible scholar, not me. Okay, I overlap a little here, and I might get in his territory, and he can always correct me. But a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Well, where'd 3 come in here? We've been talking 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. Where's the 3? And to me, that's how I look. I look, okay, we put the 2 of us, and then that third. Okay, so then we go to 3. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken, and that's what we want to bind together. It's how much can we do when there's two of us plus him versus me and God and Jack and God. We can do a lot. If you've seen Jack, he's built. He's not quite as big as Brother Stan, but he's close. He can do quite a bit when his back's not out and on his own. He's just. I hate sitting by him on the plane. He takes half my seat. It's like this wide. It's like Brother Stan. So, it's like I don't have any room. But he can do a whole lot by himself, but I guarantee he can do more when we're together. When it's the 2 of us. When we're just, and I'm not talking just physical stuff. It's all the mental and how we handle things. So when we look at it, what if Adam and Eve had to discuss together what God had told them? Again, I prepare my stuff, and that man there prepares his stuff, and we don't talk very much. Like I did this today. So when it overlaps, just go, okay, it must need to be said because it's overlapping. Okay, so if they had discussed together what God had told them, what if they had discussed their future and had goals? What if Eve had consulted Adam first, asked him what he thought? What if Adam had warned his wife to be cautious? What if Adam had yelled out, "No, don't do it"? What if they had communicated? So we look at that. How would our lives be different today? And you can go, well, someone else would have messed up then because it was God's plan. God knew and all this. Okay. But just think, what if they had communicated? So we got to take this and apply it to our lives because we know history. What is history? It is something that just repeats itself, right? Well, how much is this repeating itself? All the time. And thousands of couples every day that this kind of stuff is repeating itself because they don't communicate. They don't discuss. They don't work together. They don't bond together. So we look at, what if? Okay, so like Adam and Eve, we have the same physical, emotional, spiritual needs. We desire attention, comfort, approval, and affection. And 2 are better than 1. We want to strive to develop that relationship with God as a couple. And this is done through communication. Whether that's communication with God, and Stephen had a good example, with me and my dad and me with God. And yeah, because we have to look at it as, how are we going to develop that? We have to speak. We have to be and be together. But if we don't share some stuff, share some ideas, share, things that are threats to us, share desires. All right, let's talk about rock climbers. Yeah, I go on tangents too. Okay, so we look at rock climbers. I'm not a rock climber. Anybody here a rock climber? All right. So, good, because if I say anything wrong, none of you will know I'm saying it wrong, because I'm not a rock climber either. I lived in Grand Ledge. They were known for the ledges, and right near my house, like one house down, was a big park. It wasn't a park for, like, kids. It was a park that you go and you climb, because we had the ledges, and people would go out there and learn to climb, and that way then they could climb those really high ones. And so, they would be climbing up this, some parts are kind of sheer rock, and they come out this way. It always amazes me how you can go up a rock, and then the rock comes out like this, and you're going up that way. I don't know. To me that just defies the laws of gravity and just mechanics of how our bodies work. But when we look at it, rock climbers, they always want to go 2 people. Most people don't go climb rocks by themselves. And there's a lot of advantages to using 2 ropes. The first is that it reduces rope drag, which prevents, your rope from acting as dynamically as it can. Rope drag is that pull. If you look at the thing on the right, when you're going up, you have to pull your rope through all those little loops. Now, if that was a sheer cliff or it was straight and there was no jagged rocks and no, ins and outs in that might not be so hard just to pull through this way. Think of sewing. If you sew and you do too many stitches, like how much harder is it to pull it through than just one stitch, right? But because they have jagged rocks and edges and all that, when you only use one rope, it's a lot harder to do that than if you do it like on the left and you're using the two ropes. And they do that in case they fall, right? They have to secure themselves, and then they climb up. So when we have that and we build it to where we have the two of us working for God, two of us walking in God's footsteps, the way He wants us to walk. When we have two of us, we don't have all the drag. So much easier going forward. It was funny, Dad and I were talking today, and he brought up that, when he first got in church and was married and doing all that kind of stuff, he wanted to start an orphanage. And I said, you know what, that's funny? Because that's what I wanted to do too. But God didn't give me the right husband in order to do that, was the comment. He gave me the right husband. He did not give me the right husband in order to start an orphanage. God would have had to give me a different husband if that was God's plan for my life. Because my husband's lucky if he can handle one child. So, it's just not his nature. And she is plenty for him. So it's just, when we look at that, but when we have the two, we cut down on that drag, that stuff that can pull us down and keep us from really moving forward. We want to have that strength in order to be able to do that. And with that person next to us, if we communicate, if we share our goals and we share our visions and our dreams and our fears and even, what Stephen mentioned is Regina sharing her dreams. When you don't even understand, we share all that. It cuts down on the drag because there's two of us. The other thing it does is it allows greater flexibility in load sharing. We all got junk. It would be really nice if we didn't. But no one is spared from that. It is really hard to shelter someone where they don't have any stuff. And so we got some load that we carry. Even if it's not like negative stuff that's happened in our lives, okay? It could be neutral stuff. It could be positive things. It could be as a pastor, that you're carrying the load of other saints. There are issues in life. It is helpful to have that partner that you can talk to. I know, even in my field, they say, don't isolate yourself. Stay connected professionally. And that's one thing I've kind of missed in Texas. I had a lot of professional connections in Lansing area because I grew up there and I went to school there and I worked there and I went to school and I worked and I went to school and I worked and, did that for a lot of years. So I had a lot of connections. I didn't have to decide what am I going to do when I graduate? I had 4 or 5 different people going, we want you to come work with us. We want you to come here. We want you to come there. I just had to choose because I had all those professional connections. And in Texas, I didn't have that. It's starting new. It's trying to know people. I can even meet someone, but it's hard to refer someone to someone because I don't know how they are professionally. I don't even know how they are personally if I only meet them at a meeting or something. And so I tell people, I don't feel comfortable referring you to people. But it kind of isolates because I don't want to take all the stuff that I do at work and dump it on my husband. But I have to, some of it. And I don't use names and that, but at times I need that because I need him to help carry my load. And there was one time I told him something, and this was a few years ago. I don't share this kind of stuff with him anymore. But I told him something, and he said, oh my goodness, I feel like throwing up. Don't ever tell me anything like that again. Oh my goodness, that image just keeps going through my head. Oh, I can't believe you told me that. Man, I wish you hadn't told me that. We went through the whole evening that way. I can't get this out of my head. I said, I know. That's what my life's like sometimes. Because a lot of it goes in. You hear a lot of people's stuff. And your load can get heavy. And I said, there's just times, honey, I have to dump it. I dump it a lot at an altar. I give a lot of it to God. I give it all to God, but at times it just is really heavy. So having that communication where I just need you to listen, it really helps to lighten the load. And so we want that. We want to be that strong, because we want to have those two. Now you can't do it by yourself. A lot of us do. We know how it is, and we know how much harder it is when we do it by ourselves. There's a lot of single parents out there, a lot of people that are single, never married. It's not that you can't do it. It's just, if we have that spouse, why not make it easier and build that relationship there and pull it together as a couple? All right. Main thing is we praying together, okay? When we pray together, it dissolves resentments and bitterness. It's really hard to sit there and you're praying and that and if you really touch God, get in touch with God, you're not going to be going, oh, man, okay, let's go back to, I don't even want to talk to you. So it helps us. It binds us together. It takes those differences that we have in temperament and in ideas and taste, and it helps us to pull that together so we can have a stronger home. We can be stronger as a couple instead of it tearing us apart. So it's really, you can read and read and read and read, okay? And I've seen many of it, and I don't reference all of it, but you can read and read how it's really hard for people to be constantly at each other, have disagreements and miscommunication if they're getting on their knees every day and praying together. That we communicate, that we draw together in that, and we pull from that. So we do want to have prayer. That's, one of the key things we don't want to let go of, and not have time to do it. Okay, communication. What we want to have, those who want to change our habit reactions to thoughtful responses, okay? We all have that default, like I referred to, okay? We have a default of how we respond. And it could be that we just see things as black and white. It could be that everything's horrible. It could be that I always take it personal. There's lots and lots of defaults. But what we want to do is we have communication patterns. And your spouse will know it. Like I mentioned last night, I say to my husband, I need to tell you something. Well, I know over the years that I have to do that because that prepares him mentally to receive what I have to say sometimes. Because I know when I wouldn't do that and I would jump right in, which is more my communication style, I'm just very directive. I could have lived in Boston. And so I could just say it blunt, it's just, this is how it is. So we learn that. But what we want to do is there's aspects that can bother the other person. So we want to look at what's habitual, okay? What's our habit? What's our default? And change it into more thoughtful responses. We first have to identify, our negative reactions. So we're going to do it from the I perspective, not need to change my spouse. So for me, what I have to do is I have to recognize when things bother me, when I have this, ugh, or I want to just snip back at him, or I just kind of get angry. I notice that I have it, then I want to identify, okay, what caused that? See, I know one big one with my husband is he doesn't ask me to do anything. You'd think, well, that's not so hard. No, I didn't say that he doesn't want me to do anything. What I said is he doesn't ask. He makes statements. The dogs need to go out. We're out of milk. The oil needs to be changed in your car. He makes statements, and it irks me to death. Because if you want me to do something, then ask me. Oh, do you want me to let them out? Oh, I'm just saying they need to go out. See, and that's his issue that he won't ask. And then when I ask him to do something, he'll say, well, I never asked you to do anything. This is a big one for us, okay? And I recognize it, and I deal with my emotions, because guess what? At 56, he's not changing, because I've tried for the last 13 years, and he's not changing. So the only thing I can change is me and my reactions. But I can still talk about it. And he knows I talk about it because I tell him. And I'm like, yeah, you never ask me to do anything. You just make statements. We changed our clocks tonight. Does that mean you want me to change the clocks, or are you going to do it? Whatever you want. He won't ask me. But again, like I said, if I'm like, can you empty the trash? Can you do that? Can you do that? You're always asking me to do stuff. Ugh. All right, so got to recognize it. So that's the first, we recognize when we have that emotional reaction, and then why is it? So I know why. It didn't really take me too long in the marriage to figure it out, okay? But it is. It's just like, oh my goodness, if you want some, ask me to do it. But he won't. So I live with that. So what we do is we identify it, okay? So we want to. What we want to not do is defend or withdraw, okay? When we're having a discussion, whether that's an argument or a pleasurable discussion, when we're having a discussion, we do not want to defend or withdraw. Saying, I'm sorry, I really do. The reason is, those are not helpful. Most of the time, those are passive aggressive. Well, I'm sorry. Well, I really am sorry. Well, I just thought it would be better if we did this. It just doesn't. All the other person comes back and goes, well, it wasn't. Or something along those lines. It just irks the other person usually, because it's just defending. And I often tell people, why are you defending? You know what you think. Why do you feel you have to defend it? Don't defend it. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, but you're defending. You forgot to get milk. Well, I'm sorry, but I had work to do. You didn't clean up, the living room. Well, I'm sorry, but I had other things to do. It's the ... that's after it. It's not just the, I'm sorry. It's justifying, okay? So it's the sorry, I'm sorry. It could be tone. Or, because yes, saying I'm sorry is legitimate if there's no ... It's I'm sorry, It's just I'm sorry, period, is good. I'm sorry I didn't think about it. I'm sorry I didn't want to. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry. All of that isn't helpful. Okay? It is being defensive, and it's kind of argumentative. Okay? And then the tuning out is the withdrawal. What we want to do is you want to use active listening. Okay? And that helps because I'm sorry, when we defend stuff, then we're not really hearing what the other person says. So we want to use some active listening. And so those would be, you can clarify, what do you mean by? Are you saying that you must feel upset? You must feel angry. You seem to be angry about this. You seem upset by this. You seem disgusted. It seems like you don't trust me. No, get some clarification. What you're doing is validating feelings. This is a harder one for guys, that whole validation. And I say that only because I work on it often in my office. It doesn't matter if it's a couple, husband, wife, if it's a teenage daughter with a father. There's a lot of that sometimes it's hard just to validate. Females are a little better at validating. It makes sense that you would be upset when I don't call when I'm going to be late coming home from work. Instead of saying, well, I'm sorry I got stuck in traffic, or I'm sorry I had a project that took me longer than I expected. Saying, it makes sense that you would be mad that I didn't call. It makes sense that if I say I'm going to be home at 6 for dinner, I don't get home until 7:30, that you would be upset. That's mine. That's with my husband. I say, I'll be home at 7, and I show up at 8:30. And pre-cell phones, it was a lot worse. But even with cell phones, we lose track of time. So we want to use the active listening, okay? You must feel, you seem, makes sense. You know, you stay on topic that way instead of defending. Often we get, if someone accuses, why are you doing that? You're going to give me a reason why, right? Why did you do that? Well, because. Instead of looking at, why is the other person bothered by this? Like, why is she picking on me? What do you care? Why are you writing stuff down? Okay, we can defend it, which isn't often the subject, the reason to even have the conversation. Because we go deeper. It's like, what's going on with the person? I'm going to get to that in a couple minutes. But, all right, so we want to use active listening. What we don't want to do is we don't want to use statements of control, okay? Convincing. You have to understand. You're wrong about that. Why don't you do this or that? You have to do this. Do this or else. We take control. It doesn't open it up for communication and for that bonding. If you have to be in control and you have to defend your own actions, we get off topic of what's really important. And this is under the understand, like if they started a conversation or they brought a topic up to you. Now, if you brought up the topic, you're going to have to work on them not being defensive, them not having to take control. Well, fine then. Those kind of things don't help. It just shuts it right down. So we look at, okay, what's helpful, what's not. Okay, what we do want to do is use effective expression. Well, I feel unappreciated when you don't show up for dinner for an hour and a half after you told me you'd be home. I feel you don't care about my feelings if you clip your toenails in the living room. I don't know. Anything, whatever you're talking about. And so but if you state the feelings, it helps versus taking that control. It's, would you explain to me? Saying would you versus could you is a good idea. Could you means are you capable? And we pick up on really, really little subtle things up here. All right? Could you explain to me? Well, yes, I can explain to you. What, I think I'm an idiot? Well, of course I can. Okay, so that's the could. But would you? Would you explain more about what you're saying? Not could you explain. Would you, tell me what you think about this? Would you mind us eating dinner and then we come back to this subject? So whatever. Making the request using the would you is good. I'm willing, not willing to. Set some limits. I'm willing to discuss this with you, but I'm not going to have a screaming match. I'm willing to, look at how we're doing the finances. Does that make sense? Everybody's looking at me. All right, here we go. What you don't want to do is condemn, okay? Complaining, blaming, criticizing, comparing, okay? You never, you can see never, ever, always, all that kind of stuff comes in here. Words that are not good. You always do this. You never do this, okay? And I know you guys have heard me say this. If they've never done it, then why do you expect them to do it now? That's just foolishness. You never take the garbage out. Well, why were you thinking he'd do it this time? You always complain. Well, then why is it surprising you now if she always complains? Right? Okay, so never, ever. When people get angry, those words come in there, and they come in as strong. You never listen to me. You never cared about me. You always put me down. Okay, because we get intense with it. And that's what we're doing is condemning. See, and that's reprogramming that brain. Let me show you what to do. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Okay. What you want to do is deflect or diffuse. Okay? You want to turn killer words into kindness. I would really like it if you would listen to me when I'm talking. Not, you never listen to me. You're always complaining. I would like to hear something pleasant. I would like to hear what you do appreciate about life or what you do like about me. We can put it in a whole lot of different terms. And so it's turning it into kindness. Agree in fact or in theory. I hear what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I hear what you're saying. I can understand where you might think that. Look for the miscommunication or miscommunication when those things are going on. When it's that heated. Because it really is a matter of just not going there. You don't get into the always, never. You mentally, it's like, I'm not going to say that word or those words. I'm just not using them. I'm not going to lose it. Never, never. Always. I'm always never going to lose it. But it's, it's a mental, really, it really is going there. And believe me, when... Exactly. And that's where you're changing the habitual. That's that first side. You're changing it to thoughtful expression, responses, then the habitual reactions. It's kind of like saying, I get angry and I punch someone. I can't help myself. Really? It's the same as saying, I get angry, I can't help swearing at you. Really? I can't help but say those words. Because if I can get those other words out of from coming out of my mouth, I can keep those words ever and never and you are. It's good. When you're angry, don't start sentences with you are or your a. Okay? But see, we don't use that other language. And a lot of us used to. If we don't use that language, then we can learn not to use this other. Where it's just really offensive to the other. We're tearing them apart. It's just the determination of, I'm not going there. I can be angry, but you know what? I'm not going there. Because I'm staying in control of this body and this brain. And when we were first married, my husband did not like that at all. Because most people, when they're angry, misery really does love company. So if I'm angry, I want you angry. If I'm hurting, I want you hurting. And I want you responding in that way. It's not a whole lot of fun if I'm really mad and I'm yelling and you're not yelling back. And we both came out of the world. So it's just, I'd learned it a little quicker. I had that horrible first husband. So it's not good. I mean, I've had other people lose it with me, and they're yelling, and I stay really calm. First of all, you're not controlling me because I'm a control freak. I stay in control of myself, and I'm not giving it to you. So I maintain that attitude, but it's also, how am I going to do it? I know I'm not going to defend actions I don't need to defend. I can apologize. I can accept responsibility if I did bother the other person or if I've done something, or I could say, I can understand why you would feel that way. I can totally understand why that would upset you. I can totally understand where you're coming from. Can we talk about this? It was not my intent. And it might be, well, you weren't even thinking about me. Maybe you're right. Maybe I need to work on that. I apologize. I'm sorry. See, it's a period. It's a period. Well, and you don't follow it with, I'm sorry I upset you. I'm sorry I upset you. I'm sorry I did that. It's just, I'm sorry, period. Exactly. and the tone, right? I'm sorry, we know from kids, yeah. I'm sorry. No, you're not. Or, yes, you are. You're pretty sorry. We can do all that tone stuff because we know how to do it. But it really is looking at, well, what can we use? It's understanding what's going on with the person. Let me see what's on the next slide. I think I know what it is. Okay. It's not. But I'm going to come back to it because I have one that comes back to kind of what we were talking about. Okay, Groucho Marx said, years ago I tried to top everybody, but I don't anymore. I realized I was killing conversation. When you're always trying to go for a topper, you aren't really listening. It ruins communication. And that's when we're so ready, and that's what I talked about last night. We get into being the attorney mode. So the counselors, how does that make you feel? Well, how does that impact you? What difference does that make to you? I'm really not that kind and sweet when I'm in the office, but I can act like it. People tell me something and I say, so? Well, okay, so? Well, okay, I heard all that, but so? Because it's issues, but it's like, get me where that matters. How does that really matter? And then we can address it. But that's more counts. But we get in this attorney mode of I'm always trying to top. Now, obviously, Groucho Marx was probably being the comedian, always trying to top them. But if we're having a conversation, are we trying to top the other person? I can talk fast, and I can think fast, and I can run circles around my husband. If you want to get into talking. And I don't even have to take a break. I don't even know if I breathe. I can just keep going and going and going and going. But why would I want to? Is it a conversation? Is it one way? And so it's looking at, and when he says something, I do him, well, I can say this back. I can say that back. What about this? Okay? It's that topper thing. It's that conversation. Is that bonding us together as a couple into one flesh? It's not. It's allowing us to live our own two lives together in the same house, sharing the same bank account, and sharing children. But it doesn't bind us together. So the communication part is, where am I going with this? What is my goal in having this conversation? Is it to pull us closer together? Is it to rip the other person apart? Is it to destroy our relationship? And if you always think in those terms, that anger, when it comes up, and it does, anger can come up and you can always have that choice. You go like this. Now, I have had women go, I hate it when he walks away from me when we're arguing. So I say, all right, tell her, I need 10 minutes. And then walk, because he says, if I stay, I'm going to lose it. And if you're going to lose it, it's better to put yourself in a timeout. Right? Pull it back in. If you're really angry, you have to realize, though, if you're getting angry, that person's pushing your buttons, and they're saying stuff because they know it pushes your buttons. So again, I come back to that control thing. When you go into an argument with someone, if you anticipate they're going to say stuff that's going to push your buttons, then you go, I'm ready for it. And you think they're going to do it. I can even hear what they're going to do. I can hear it coming out of their mouth. And you know what? I'm going to say something else. I'm going to even figure it out ahead of time what I'm going to say instead. I'm not going to get angry. I'm going to go back to the topic at hand, because so many times what we do is we try to deflect off of it instead of staying focused. When it was the other one's talking about deflecting, okay, or diffusing, that means to get away from the anger. Okay? But often if we're trying, okay, you're up front. Corey and I work, let's say he's living with my husband and me, and he made a sandwich, on the counter, and I walk in, and there's no sandwich there, but there's breadcrumbs, there's a knife, there's a slab of mustard, all on the counter. I can say, "You are such a slob!" Okay? Or I say, "Corey, what's up? Look at the counter." Now he could go, "Yeah, but I put my shoes in my room." Kids will do that. Adults will do that. Okay? Meaning, but I did something good. Let's deflect off of what I did what you're focused on. Or you could say, "Well, I was going to come back and do it later." And what do we say to people when they say that? Really? All right. But see, I could say, "Well, I prefer if you do it right away. When you make the mess, I prefer if you clean it up then, because that way we don't have those little critters coming in the house." Because a lot of times the responses we get back, we want to go, okay, because we know. Like when? It's been 3 hours, right? I don't need to point out that he made the sandwich 3 hours ago. That's just fighting. But it also could be, he could turn around and say to me, "Well, you left milk spilt on the stove." Because that's another thing that we do. When we confront someone on something, then they point out something we did wrong. And it has nothing to do with it. Well, we'll discuss that in a minute. Let's stay with the crumbs. "I need you to wipe off the counter. I didn't know I left milk." Or, "Yeah, you're right. We both need to work on not being slobs." But you want to deflect off the topic. Now, is it usually as simple as crumbs on the counter? No. But sometimes it is. And we can have huge, huge discussions and arguments because of something as simple as crumbs on the counter, socks on the floor, shoes by the door. Any of that stuff. Just keeps going. Okay, so as far as listening is a really powerful tool. Listening puts us in a position where we can truly understand where the other person is coming from. But if we're so worried about what we're going to say next, we're not really listening. We want to listen and understand. And we actually often have to stop your brain from going there. So we listen. Doing counseling, I learned to have two brains going. I have my listening brain where I'm taking it all in. And then my other brain's processing it and going, "Okay, put the pieces here." But if I'm not listening to this first part, if I'm not getting all the pieces, and I'm thinking about what am I going to have for lunch and all that, it's not going to happen. But I can do this. Let me get all the pieces here and figure out then what needs to happen for this person. But I don't know if, do we sit down with our spouse and when they're talking to us, do we think, "Okay, let me get all the pieces." Not, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to shut him up? How am I going to shut her up? How, this conversation is like this means to this end. Here's the conversation. The end is fix it. Now, how many guys just had a problem with what I just said? Is a conversation a means to an end? Yeah. Typically. It's a means to an end. And for women, a conversation is not a means to an end. It's a process. You want to understand that. For women, talking is a process. Having a conversation is a process. I get more complaints from men. We talk about something and then she wants to bring it up again later. It's because it's a process. It's not a means to an end. Most men look at conversation, it's a means, it's an end. We already discussed this, we ended this. Why are we going to have to talk about it again? I already closed that box. But conversation to women is a process. Okay? And it's the end. When I say it's a process, it means that it's not always just a means to this one end. Conversation for a female is, I'm building a relationship. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm really just venting. I'm just talking to you. I'm telling you stuff. I'm building a relationship with you. I'm really smart enough to figure it out myself. I don't need you to figure it out for me. It's a process, meaning it's our relationship. We're talking about stuff. It doesn't mean we never want to get to an end on anything. Oh, it definitely helped. Especially if you say things like, oh, man, I hear you. Oh, that'd make me mad. Yeah, it's all that stuff. It's giving it back. It's active listening. And you can look back a couple slides. It's that active listening. Wow. Yeah, that'd make me angry if that happened. That'd make me sad if that happened. Well, I'd want to smack her. Anything. Where you're validating what they're saying. It's a process of relationship. It's not, I'm talking to you because this is my problem and I want to get to the end. Now, does that mean that's never the case? No. But most conversations for females it's a process. I'm just talking. We want to talk. We want to hear what you have to say. We don't want you to fix it necessarily. Any female in here absolutely need a man to fix their stuff? Not absolutely. Not absolutely, but there's times. When I asked my husband, does that dishwasher that's been laying out by our trailer for a year, is that just going to stay there forever? That conversation, there was a means to an end to it for me. I definitely wanted that dishwasher that had been laying out there. It was hidden by the trailer, but I wanted it gone. His response was, well, you haven't given me a number, the phone number, which confused me. And I said, what? Well, you haven't given me the phone number to the trash company. Okay. Which then I got sarcastic and said, I'm sure it's on the side of the truck when it comes twice a week, every week for the last year. But I will look it up for you. I went in, I wrote it down, I gave it to him, and within the week the dishwasher was gone. So sometimes it is a means to an end. But most conversations is not mostly a means to an end. It's not, I'm having this because I want you to go do this. I want to talk to you about tickets, airline tickets, and we have to get them. Yes, there's those certain things. But I guarantee if you start talking about kids, it's just like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about our future. Let's talk about our goals. Let's talk about where we're going in life. Let's talk about our dreams. Let's talk about what's important. Let's talk about my education. Let's talk about our grandkids. Most of that, it's not. It's not like, okay, we're talking about, why are we talking about this? And guys will say that. Why are we talking about this? It's not a task. Right. Can be. Right. All right, listening leads to understanding. Your partner will then have less need to defend, withdraw, attack, or give long-winded speeches. Okay? If you allow your partner to know that you heard them, they won't keep trying to get you to hear them. So therefore, they don't have to keep repeating it. So by going that, whoa, okay, wow, grunts. Grunts help. Okay, so long-lasting solutions come from that understanding. And then they're never reached by convincing, ordering, threatening, or nagging. And over time, deep levels of understanding will develop. Conflicts will begin to resolve themselves. Okay? We understand. I know my spouse. All right. Your persistent efforts to show understanding will serve as a model that then can even teach your partner. Like I said, with my husband at first, but now it's not, it doesn't happen where he's getting angry and coming at me kind of stuff. Like I said, we came out of the world, so we had a lot of that dysfunctional communication. But, there's a learning. And it, if you keep it, and you express that, and you do the understanding and the affirmation and that, yes, I understand, yes, you're being heard, it will become reciprocated in most cases. Not all. But we always assume that when your partner does not treat you well, there's an old resentment or fear behind that behavior. If you go into it with that assumption, that when they're not treating me well, there's something from their past or there's something that's happened to them that's at the core of this, it's not me, you will react to them a lot differently. You will be more empathetic, sympathetic, understanding. Because we know that. If we know the history of someone and like they had a really rough childhood, they were beaten their whole life, we're going to interact with them different, right? If we know that, dad was a drug addict, mom was alcoholic, we're going to treat them, that's how they grew up. Or we know, they were raped, we know that they were beaten. I saw a guy that in Austin, he was, I don't know how you put it, abducted, I guess, by another guy that made him go into his house. He tied him up, and then he was there for like 12 hours, tied up. The guy ate his food and stole his stuff and all this. It's a horrible experience. But that kind of, if we have that understanding, then we interact with them different, right? I had a guy in the church say a negative comment about one of the women in our church, and it's open knowledge, so it wasn't just private. But I said, it probably wasn't open to him. I said, well, I guess being repeatedly raped as a teenager and that we could have some little understanding of why she might act that way now. His face went. So we do have some understanding. It's like give people a break. But if we do that with our spouse, if we say, okay, there's some hang up here, some resentment, something that wasn't resolved. My mother-in-law sat at my dining room table laughing and telling me how she knocked my husband out as a teenager with a cast iron pan. The reason she did that was because she was beating up his younger sister, her younger daughter, just on her and just punching her in the face, and he pulled her off of her earlier during the day. She said, I'll get back at you. I'll get you back. She did that night when he was sleeping. She went and woke him up and knocked him out of the cast iron pan. But she sits there now. This is just a couple years ago. Sits there at my table laughing about it. I didn't find that so funny. I didn't confront her. I didn't laugh. But I have some understanding, with some of the stuff with my husband. Even Sarah does. We don't get close. If he's sleeping and you need to wake Daddy up, you don't get close to him, do you? Because he might swing. And he has swung. Then he hurts his back. And then it's hard not to laugh because okay. So, all right. You can reduce the intensity of your own reaction. I guess I said that. By understanding the hurt that underlies your partners. We all have stuff. We all have issues. It could be mild issues. It could be major issues. I don't even know who qualifies that stuff, but we all have stuff. It could be just little stuff. I didn't really feel like my daddy loved me growing up, or my mama was mean to me, or I had a sister that was really pretty and I wasn't as pretty. It could be lots of stuff that we react to. So we try to just understand it. All right, I need to wrap this up, let you guys go. All right, what if, Adam, this is that first slide, okay? Think about these. What if all these things happen? So when we take this and we put this into your own marriage, and with your spouse, if we take that, the whole, if they discuss things together, like I said, things are just repeating. Because we don't talk about stuff, and that causes problems. We don't talk about our future. We don't have discussions and develop these goals. So what if we do all that, During marriage, have you and your spouse in general talked most things over together? How often do you and your spouse discuss the way you would like your marriage to be 5 years from now? We need to have these kind of discussions. Where are we going in life? What are our goals? How often do you and your spouse make deliberate, intentional changes in order to strengthen your relationship? People come in and I say, okay, what have you done in the last week to intentionally strengthen your relationship? So that's what we work on. Do intentional things. Not, well, we went out to dinner last night. Okay. Was that intentionally to strengthen your relationship? Well, no, but we had to eat. Okay, so we can look at it. What's intentional? You know, date nights, having those discussions, doing things he likes, doing things she likes. Drawing together, taking time, praying together, taking 10 or 15 minutes each day. Doesn't sound like a lot, but most couples don't do it. 10 or 15 minutes just to sit there and talk about them. Not the kids, not work, not the church, not just them. How are you? How often do you and your spouse make specific changes in your priorities in order to enhance your marriage? Okay, you got to have that unity. It's got to be, that relationship's at the top. And I know God's up there. I'm not replacing him. But as a relationship, got to have that husband and wife. And then we have the kids, and we have, with church, and we have everything else. Okay, to what extent do you think you and your spouse agree on long-term goals for your marriage? How often do you and your spouse discuss the primary objectives you have for your relationship? Can you and your spouse discuss most sacred beliefs? How often do you and your spouse talk with each other about personal problems? What about sex? Do you and your spouse are visiting friends. Something is said by the friends that cause you to glance at each other. Would you understand each other? Do you know what I mean by that? Something happens and you look at each other. Do you know what he means? Do you understand each other? How, we have some stumbling blocks. So, do you want me to do this or cut it? Okay, some stumbling blocks. What we want to do is you want to promise yourself. So I promise myself to begin to recognize those beliefs about myself and others that make me feel sad, guilty, anxious, or inadequate. That will interfere a whole lot with communication. If I feel inadequate, if I have low self-esteem, there's no room for that. But if I feel horrible about me, anything you say, I'm going to see it with that kind of screen. And we want to not have that screen there. So we need to deal with our own inadequacy so we don't have it through that colored lens. We want to be able to communicate openly and honestly. I promise to help myself remember that I'm an adult. I'm not helpless. I have options and choices. I have the ability to change. So I can control my temper. I can control my tears. I can control all my feelings. I can do that. I promise to take responsibility for my own cruel, critical, hurtful, or victim behavior. Some of us play victim. Some of us are mean. Take responsibility for it. Own it. Change it. I promise to not badmouth my spouse. I promise to admit when I am wrong. That's a big one. Admit when you're wrong. And that's where it's okay. Say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I made a mistake. Address your needs, and to address my needs to always do right and get in the last word, okay? Here's the last thing. A judge was interviewing a woman regarding her pending divorce and asked, what are the grounds for your divorce? She replied, about 4 acreage and a nice little home in the middle of the property with a stream running through it. No, he said. What is the foundation of this case? It is made of concrete, brick, and mortar, she responded. He continued, what are your relations like? I have an aunt and uncle living here in town, and so do my husband's parents. He said, do you have a real grudge? No, she replied, we have a 2-car carport, and have never really needed one. Please, he tried afresh, is there any infidelity in your marriage? Yes, both my son and daughter have stereo sets. They don't necessarily like the music, but to acknowledge your question, the acknowledgement to your question is yes. Ma'am, does your husband ever exhaust you? Yes, she responded, about twice a week. He gets up earlier than I do. Finally, in frustration, the judge asked, lady, why do you want a divorce? Oh, I don't want a divorce, she replied. I've never wanted a divorce. My husband does. He said he can't communicate with me. Okay, so we want to communicate. We want to make those connections. We want to build that. Because when you look at Adam and Eve, I don't know. I think they had it perfect, and they didn't think, we better work on this relationship. But, we give them a break because they were the first ones, and what would they know? Okay? So, all right. I'll turn it over to Stephen.
One thing that struck me as interesting, too, that I want you to also pull in addition to the human application, is the application of this communication with God. When we pray, how much do we tell Him why we did stuff? Defend ourselves to Him? Or how much do we hear Him? That really struck me in the middle, and I will forget it if I don't tell you now. So I'm going to tell it to you now. And to the extent that we can begin to do that with God, who is perfect and totally trustworthy, we can actually develop habit when doing it with our imperfect spouse or our imperfect brother or sister. All of the things that Janet shared. By the way, these things are available online. I know Janet ran through a lot of this very quickly. Those of you with computers, I encourage you go. You can download the PowerPoint. You can work through them very carefully, very slowly, and look at those. And I would encourage you to be aware of that, okay? Because I know that we pack a lot of information in here. Because if we don't, we would make this a 10-year process. And believe me, between my sister and I, we could make this a 10-year process. Okay? So we want to be a little more efficient than that. So be sure to tap into that online. And wanted to have us think about that. Amen. Can we give my sister a hand and thank her? Amen. Amen. And as I confirm that, and I do thank her for partnering with me, and it has been fun to see God use the two of us from very different vantage points as we coordinate the big picture. We do coordinate, okay, what do we want in the cover? Big picture, communication. We approach it spiritually, mentally, so forth. And then we each go to God and we each work on what we're going to do. And it is amazing to watch God work together. It's really cool as a pastor to have God work with me when I'm preaching. But then it's really cool to have God coordinate between multiple people within one setting. And it's a great pleasure, and I do appreciate her working with me in that. All right, let's stand. Lift your hand to the Lord. Everybody remember to turn your clocks forward 1 hour. Jesus, thank you, Lord, for your word. Thank you, Lord, for our learning tonight. God bless us now as we go our ways. Lord, let your blessings be upon us, not only through the night, but tomorrow. God, give us good services. Thank you for your blessings. Thank you for the knowledge and the wisdom that you have imparted to us tonight. Now help us to implement, help us to grow, help us to engage. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Everybody say amen. God bless you. You're dismissed in Jesus' name. Thank you for your time.